questions? Are there any questions that you have or any comments you want to make based out of your conversation? Anybody have a question? Yes.
I'm really having a bit of a challenge with your putting eras and time. I'm having a challenge with putting. All right.
We can hear
You're
you.
talking about the blues being one era, and then 150 years ago, and 50 years ago, and 30 years ago. So what I'm trying to get around my mind is I think that there were people and times that were yellows and greens way back thousands of years ago. I think of our First Nations people who really looked at how everything worked together, and some of those characteristics. And I think of like Greek philosophers, and so I'm just, I guess, not quite jumping on your eras and time frames, but I don't think it probably matters, does it?
Well, what I would say is why I give those time frames is that's when that value system began to come on board. And again, this spiral dynamics is based on life conditions. So I can tell you one of the situations in my heritage, the United Methodist Church right now, is there's actually going to be a meeting in February to determine if we are going to be able to marry women or men or be ordained. And the reason why is because we're a worldwide church. And the church is growing. Where's the church growing? Why is the church growing in Africa? What value system are they moving out of and into? They're moving tribal and red into blue. And they're searching for stability, and the church does a darn good job of bringing stability and a code of conduct and a sense of safety and security, right? So the church is growing in Africa, the church is growing in Asia. So, and my brothers and sisters operate out of a green value system, and that green value system says we all need to, love our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. They're all children of God, and there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. There's something morally bad about you if you can't get there.
Amen.
But if you spent a little bit of time in a village in Africa who they don't even have running water yet, and they're still concerned about the lion that can come in the village and eat their child, do you think that they really care? Do you think they're even ready to have that conversation? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it almost becomes a reverse imperialism. Like we are placing our values on a culture that doesn't have our values. We're placing our green value system on a red value system culture. That's what happened in the war in Iraq with George Bush. What did he want to do? He wanted to bring the rule of law into a tribal system. How did that work for him? Not too well. We can't, we're asking people to jump value systems. We're asking, people in a red value system to skip blue and orange and come meet us in green.
No, I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. The people do not evolve from these values. You're presenting the idea that somehow orange and green and yellow are more highly evolved. And I've lived in villages in Asia and Africa, and they're at least as sophisticated as we are about these things. They're comfortable. The intolerance comes from the imposition of authoritarian and colonial ideas. It's not traditional.
Yeah, we could get into a large conversation about that, and I would agree with you in that, but that's where it is right now, based on the history of the colonialism. But that
I agree with you that they're value-based right now. Their cultural norms are different.
their cultural norms are different based on the life conditions in which they find
It's not
themselves.
an evolutionary thing.
No, colonialism was all about our imposing our value system of female subservience, GBLT, not acceptable, blacks not acceptable. This is what colonialism is all about. Our First Nations accepted GBLT. Women were equal. They did have servants, but not quite the same way as the blacks were servants.
Slaves.
Well, all that in the blue and the red and the blue value systems, all cultures have a slave economy. So that's just part of that value system.
Thank you. The actual classification and grouping of the different value systems I find very helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I find it very helpful as well, except the way that they are expressed are like, for example, the image of the tribal value may, the image of a First Nations person, that I had great difficulty with.
Thank you for that.
But the reason for that is because the way that we use the tribal, we use that same language for primitive. And the reality is, my own experience working within a First Nations community many years ago, is that there were powerfully green valued people in leadership in the community that I was working in. There were people there who were powerfully connected in with yellow. That was their value base, and they were giving leadership within their community from that value base. And yes, they had people who were in the kind of blue level of development and where they were in the stages in their lives. So I think the way we image things like indigenous or tribal with these stereotypical images, colonial images of First Nations peoples, I think is really problematic. At the same time, I have a lot of affinity with this way of analyzing and looking at the world. So we have to be very careful.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that, and I will change that slide. That's really helpful for me, and I'm gonna have to think about that. I understand what you're saying about that slide, how that could be offensive. How to get at that sense that it's not just a First Nations thing, it's the concept of tribe, you know?
Show a picture of a Wall Street trading floor.
That would be an orange value system.
Maybe, but they're
Yeah.
tribal too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It occurred to me that probably each one of us and the communities which we live, it occurred to me that probably each one of us and the communities that we're living in are on some continuum.
Yes.
And have parts of our culture are blue. I certainly think I try to be honest with myself, it's an underlying blue culture, and I hope that I'm somewhere to the yellow end of it. But we're all a continuum, some biased to more or other parts of that spectrum. It's like the rainbow.
Yeah, well, it's a transcend and include. So if we find our center of gravity in green, that means that we have orange and blue and red and purple and beige in us. And we can call upon that aspect of ourselves when needed, right? But somebody operating in a red value system does not have the capacity to handle the complexities of a green value system world.
Thanks. I got the microphone, so
Okay.
I'm a Gen Xer, which I'm probably in a minority in the room. There's a few of us here. I'm not convinced, so I'm going to ask you to convince me that yellow and turquoise are not warmed over green, which to me screams baby boom. And that's not an insult, because green is fantastic, right? But it really sounds like everything past green sounds like just more of the same, maybe taken an increment farther. But so I could use some convincing.
Well, actually, you're very perceptive, because basically what Claire Graves would say is that it's an octave higher, like an octave higher of a yellow would be an octave higher than beige, and turquoise would be an octave higher than, there I go again, than purple. So that there's more complexity, there's more capacity. So when you get to turquoise, we're not talking about an individual tribe, we're talking about the planet as a tribe. Does that help you at all? And yellow is interested in survival, just like beige. Yellow is interested in the survival of the planet, just like beige was interested in their own survival.
It's another take on it.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate being provoked. Like, see, and seriously, I appreciate very much your comments this evening, because they have provoked me to think about this. The thing that I am struggling with is that to talk about values and expressions changing from epoch to epoch fails to address the question of what those values we're trying to connect with in an underlying sense. And I suppose because I'm a Christian, I'm inclined to the view that there is some underlying ontology which remains constant through all of these epochs, and that each attempt to understand the ontology might change because of human circumstances, but that there should be something underlying that is constant, and that perhaps we should be looking to see what it is that blue, orange, or green are trying in their own way to connect to. So if we look at this as a prelude to a conversation about where the church might go, I'm reminded of a famous French politician who once said, the crowd, where is the crowd? I must find them and follow them. I am their leader. We don't need to understand spiral dynamics in order to get a little bit more quickly to where society is expressing itself currently. If we fail to understand what they are searching for as they change, and we try to connect to what some people would call the ontology, or other people would call the faith dimension, or the conviction.
Okay, so that was a lot, and I thank you for that. Yeah, you guys are great. I need to take notes on what you say to me. But I do want to converse a little bit right here, just with an example. Okay? So, how many of you remember what happened last year, actually around this time in Charlottesville? Okay. So, Angela, I forget her last name, she wrote a book on internet trolls and Fortran, and she said that, and how I'm going to connect it in, is a green value system expression when there is no capital T truth anymore, when all truth is relative. And when you're brought up in a way that all truth is relative. We live in a post-truth world right now. What happens to people is they either move into a sense of nihilism or narcissism. Because why not? So with these young men who were these internet trolls, they were doing it as a form of entertainment. And then along comes Trump, and they're having a real good time with that. And then along comes the alt-right, and these young men who really are in both a nihilistic and a narcissistic kind of framework were given a church, and it's called the Church of the Alt-Right. And what they were doing for giggles and kicks became a religion. Does that kind of meet you with what you were trying to say, or an example of that?
Yes, and it invites the question, what was previously genuine that became perverted? How do we go deeper?
Yeah, exactly. When there is a whole generation of people who are feeling isolated, there's a higher incidence of suicide among young adults. We could talk about, what are the life conditions of a green value system? It's the information age. It's social media. It's, I can become my own celebrity. There's such a sense of loneliness and isolation. And we've lost, because of the church decline, any concept of beloved community.
It was occurring to me when you mentioned this, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but mentioned the underlying feature. I think what the underlying feature is for all of us is feeling the love of God in our hearts. And I don't know how that fits into all of the different colors there, but I think it's the turquoise that we have deep down. And I think expressing that is where the church, where we can work with people. Because there's so many people that feel empty inside, and they need to feel God's love deep down.
Yeah, you can't say that this is a model that talks about the growth of compassion from egocentric to ethnocentric to pluralistic to world-centric to planet-centric. So with each spin of the spiral, the capacity for compassion to take in more than me, to take in more than just my faith tradition or my ethnicity, to move beyond that, and then to care about the planet. So there's this sense of a growing sense of compassion. And what I would say about the spiral, and what Ken Wilber, who's a philosopher, says, is that this is agape in action. I mean, this is, no, not agape, this is eros. This is eros in action. This is the evolution of the human spirit and our capacity to take more and more in. Yeah.
Well, if, as you said, the red cannot understand the green, how well is the green doing in understanding the red? Because we're totally baffled in the age of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of our problem, is that we don't get in dialogue with the people that think in red as he does.
Yeah.
And that isn't Trump's problem. That's the problem with the society as it is now, is that they've gone to the are we really doing a good job of dialoguing with them or finding out their fears, their anxieties that have made them support Trump?
That's a
And
very
I'm
good
not
question.
betting on him not winning the next election.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not betting, you know.
Yeah,
Are we doing a better job?
when I think about those young men that showed up in Charlottesville, I wonder who's the pastor that's talking to them? Who's the church that's taken them on? You know? I mean, they're questioning, they're wondering, what's life all about? Is this it? And what church is there to say, yeah, there's more to life than what you're doing right now? There is ultimate meaning and purpose. You are loved. There is community. And what I see most churches in a green value system do is just judge and say, we're right and you're wrong. And that's not helpful.
I'll try to get my colors right. I feel sometimes within the United Church that we are actually trying very hard to be green and yellow, in a sense of being more and more aware of the cosmos and the planet, and certainly accepting of people from very different traditions. And however, I feel sometimes our theology and language is blue. It's blue, it's judgmental. So even though we say we want to be open and accepting, and in our hearts I really believe that, when sometimes I look at our liturgies and our prayers that we use that shape our thinking, they're blue.
Yeah, I mean, that is the birth of the Protestant church, you know? Well, and that's the Catholic Church. And then you look at our structures and our hierarchy and the stability of the church. It is that container. And so basically what I'm trying to say, using this, and again, this is just a framework. It's a framework to play with. I mean, you can flush it down the toilet if you want. But it's a framework to have a conversation with, okay? So, you know, we have a particular way that blue church is expressed, right? And a particular structure and system and way of doing worship, right? And that blue-orange, we're still in that container. We might have a green sensibilities, but our container is still a blue-orange container. And it doesn't work for folks that are coming up green. You know, how many of our children go to church? Mine don't. Do any of yours? Yay, we have one person. Yeah, a couple. Do you guys have questions back there? No, okay.
Who asked if our children went to church?
Yeah, I know. Okay. So we have 3 people where their children going to church. That's great. You had a question. Oh, okay.
I'm kind of assuming that this model is wrong.
Okay.
Because I've read that all models are wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Some models are useful.
Yes.
I just read that just recently in a scientific discussion of climate models.
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that this model is wrong in some ways.
Okay.
But I'm also hoping that you'll be able to show us how it's useful to us and to our churches.
Yeah, I hope I'm beginning to do that right now. But you're absolutely right. This is a framework. This is a framework that helps me understand what's happening, not only in our churches, but in our culture. And even though every morning I wake up and I swear at the TV as my morning ritual, it does give me a perspective of compassion for people that are operating under a different value systems and are facing different life conditions, so that I know that my perspective is not the only perspective. And I think that in our divisive world, and as people of faith, it would be good and well of us to be able to take more than one perspective.
Did you want more?
Let's see. Yeah, how about two more questions? He's had his hand up for quite a while.
Oh, I just wanted to make a comment of disagreement, I'm going to say.
Sit down.
Well, it was about your comment about our whole structure is blue and our language is blue and so on.
No, she said that behind you.
But you agree.
Okay.
In fact, yes, you reinforced it.
Okay, I reinforced.
But anyway, I came out of a tradition of the Lutheran Church, which is very hierarchical, and I think is still having huge arguments about where women fit in and whether they should have power and authority and so on, and be ministers and so on, and have shifted into the United. And I want to say that one of the reasons I really like being in the church that is all of us here, I think, is that the language, I feel, has really changed. And when we look at the new hymns now, I'm a church musician in background in terms of my brother is still a musician in the Lutheran Church back in Ontario. And but as I say, I think the language has really changed, and it's not. And we've really moved out of that blue tradition in a lot of ways. The other thing I feel that we have that has really influenced us is that we've gone through about an 8-year period of the reconciliation process in terms of understanding Native traditions and Native their lifestyle and so on and so forth. And it has really sensitized us. So this issue of tribalism, I get the negative side of it in terms of looking, say, at Syria and Assad, and that the fact that he's come up through that negative, the family tribal who must have power and dominance,
right.
and so they kill all the rivals off and so on. That's one way of tribalism expresses itself. But the other side that we have become sensitive to is things like potlatches and what do they mean, and the giving away of gifts to other people, the wealth of sharing it with other people. And there's so many, and the sensitivity to nature and God being present in nature and so on. That all the kinds of things I think that have really moved us into the turquoise, I guess, of thinking about spirituality in a different way and so on, being very aware of it, of a spiritual life, the use of tese, it's a whole set of different spiritual traditions.
Yeah, so thank you for that. See, all of your questions and comments help me. Every value system has a positive impact, and it also has a shadow. So, the positive of the tribal is this sense of, honoring of the elder. A sense of being at one with nature. There's a mystical quality to it. So there's a lot of positives in all of the value systems. And then there's the shadow side as well.
ask questions.
If I can, add one more thing, which is that I thought of Bowlby's book about the 7 habits of highly effective people. And he talks about being different types of power centers. And he talks about the family power center, sort of, where you belong to something and you get lots of support from. But he said the shadow side, as you say, is that you have to fit. And that there's a set of rules in the family, and if you don't fit the family system, you're in trouble. You know, what do you call that? Shunning.
You're shunned. And that's out of the blue value system, that shunning.
Yeah.
And I want to say there's positive to green too. I mean, green value system really helps us. Like what you're doing right now is you're like saying, hey, you know, watch it with that tribal language that you're using. So what green does is it calls into question all the assumptions of all of the other value systems, and there's this sense of, wait a minute, everybody counts, everybody's story counts, we're all equal here, you know, the gift of Black Lives Matter and, you know, Me Too movement and LGBTQ rights and tribal consciousness and rights. All of that is a gift out of the green value system. Okay? One more question.
Maybe a comment.
Okay.
I work as a campus minister at the University of Victoria, and I'm an employee of the United Church of Canada to support the campus community in their spiritual seeking, learning, practice. And I work in the context of a green campus, in terms of the value bases, and a reaction in that value system to anything that's blue or orange or red, definitely red.
Yes.
So if I were, as a campus minister, were to offer a typical, you know, United Church service, nobody would show.
Right.
And that's been my experience.
Right.
And it gives me no, end of grief. And at the same time, a healthy dose of reality.
Yes.
It doesn't work. When I bring students to, say, a Sunday morning service, they come with some kind of interest. Some of them might have a memory of being in Sunday school. But there is, when they come to a Sunday morning service, out of this green world, there's no appeal in coming back to them. You say, well, that was an interesting cross-cultural experience. But, so, in my role, I've had to really try out many different things. Earlier, you asked the question, so who of our children are in our churches? Very few. And that kind of makes the assumption that the underlying tone there is that they've lost their sense of spirituality, they've lost their sense of God, they've lost their sense of connection with this something larger. Of course, the furthest thing from the truth. Right. Because if you go look, where are the millennials giving expression to their spirituality? It's happening in many, many different places. I was at a festival this summer in Oregon called The Beloved. 4,500 millennials and some millennial wannabes who happen to be boomers who are trying to relive their hippie years, like me. So I was there encountering with 4,500 mostly millennials. There was devotion going on. There was dance, movement. There was deep expressions about spirituality, about how to live into a beloved community.
Yes.
And actually, one of the things that were said by the leaders at the end, you know, we're living in a Trump era right now, and we're confused. Because I guess they're mostly greens and yellows in that community. He said, and what we need to do is go out there, and the community that we've created here in this 5 days of being alternative, being caring, supportive, devotional, dancing, doing all the spiritual practices that were being done there. We need to bring that out into the world. I thought, that sounds like a church. And so it is happening there. When I am offering things that have to do around contemplative practice, not around belief. There's a lot of stuff around belief in blue and orange. What we believe, and how we believe differently than the other people who believe worse than us. Millennials are not very interested in that.
That's right.
What they are interested in is experience. They are interested. So when I put out a notice to say we're going to learn to meditate, I have students come sit in a big circle every Monday and Thursday. 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 students sitting in a circle, concentric circles, to sit for a 20-minute contemplative practice of meditation. This Tuesday I'm being asked to come into a psychology class, a third-level psychology class, to come and teach a mindfulness practice to the students, a class of 150 students. A mindfulness practice, which is a spiritual practice, comes out of our tradition.
Right.
This Sunday afternoon I'm teaching a thing on centering prayer. With Cynthia Bourgeois, you mentioned her. So that's what the millennials are interested in.
Exactly.
And
so
it's really hard for us to come out of the boomer world and in our church to respond to that kind of reality. And I haven't quite figured out how we can actually do that.
Well, what I would say is all those examples are church. And that is Weird Church. That's why we wrote the book. And everything that you mentioned is in that book, and it's called Weird Church. So one of the things about how those of us that are in buildings like this, we discount that. We discount that from happening, right? And what I'm trying to say with this model is we have the container. And when I say container, what I mean is building. What I mean is how we do worship, the songs we sing, the prayers we pray, the activities we do in the container of worship as we know it is a blue-orange container. It doesn't work for people living in a green or expressing out of a green value system. That's why it's it's a cross-cultural experience for these kids. So when I asked the question, how many children are coming, it wasn't a cut on the kids. It's really like, what are we doing, people? Who's going to be the last person that's going to shut off the lights? Is that the legacy that we want to leave? Or can we experiment with ways to connect with people right where they are and share the stories of faith, as well as the fact that each one of us in here, oh my gosh, the amount of practice of Bible reading, of prayer, the wisdom in this room is such a gift to all those internet trolls, to all these young adults that are actually looking for mentors. And we show up in church and we say, wow, I wish, how do we get them in the door? Well, you might never get them in the door. You might have to go out and find them and meet them.
Oh, is
that me?
I think it's me.
Okay, so I'm done.
But now you've already done that. So thank you so much, Beth, for explaining this incredible model to us. And I think you can tell by the questions, everybody was pretty engaged.
We are going to have fun this weekend.
Yes, and I think there might be some, some good pub conversation. maybe we should test now. Who's going to go to the pub? No, hasn't changed at all. Okay, so we're starting again tomorrow. Doors open at 8:30. There'll be refreshments and stuff available, and we're going to start again with some Teze worship at 9 o'clock. Before you leave tonight, if you have got some extra energy, some muscle power, you can help us set up. One of the big things you can do is start unhooking chairs for us, okay? Thanks, everyone.